Chapter 10. Like he had wanted to, Devon went to Bill and asked to be allowed to act as my security any time I have to travel. I wasn't surprised when Bill agreed, with the stipulation that Devon qualify as an enforcer first. When he told me that he had to qualify in order to be my enforcer, I asked if he minded my tagging along. I was curious what qualifying entailed, and I didn't know if I'd ever get another opportunity to find out. Saturday afternoon, we followed the directions from Bill to where the trial was being held. We ended up at a rural ranch house I'd never been to. I climbed out of the pickup and saw several other people there. Bill's SUV was parked next to ours, as well as a couple more I didn't recognize. I followed Devon, staying quiet. We were there for him, and I didn't see a need to draw attention to myself. We made our way to the group of men standing in front of one building, waiting for us. The closer we got, the more people in the group I recognized. Bill was there, of course, as well as Gabriel, the enforcer who served as his daytime security, but I was surprised to see Terry there too. He normally didn't go on duty for at least a couple of hours. Bill stepped forward. "Devon," Bill spoke first. "This is going to be pretty brutal. Are you sure you want Nickie to see it?" Devon glanced at me before turning back to Bill. "Yes, sir, I'm sure. I have no intention of not qualifying, and she asked to come. I have no problem with her seeing me fight, or what I'm capable of," he replied confidently. "Besides, whether I qualify or not, I intend to teach her some self-defense. It will be good for her to see how I fight, and the kind of things I'll be teaching her." Bill looked back and forth between the two of us for a moment. I met his eyes unwaveringly. After a moment, he nodded reluctantly. "Very well, let's get this over with." Bill turned to address the entire group. "Devon, Nickie, this is Ethan Westwood. Ethan's our Theron, our head enforcer. Ethan, Devon Wilson, and Nickie Daniels." He finished the introductions and continued. "As I told you, Ethan, I'm going to need Nickie to travel on pack business, but I don't want her going alone. Devon wants to accompany her as her enforcer, but I can't allow that unless he qualifies as one. Whether he serves on the team afterward or not is between the two of you. That's why we're here. As Theron, you decide who qualifies and who doesn't. I let you know when I scheduled this that I had someone who wanted to try to qualify, but nothing else. Now I'll add a request. Because Nickie's like a daughter to me, I want to be sure that anyone I send with her is fully capable of taking care of her. With that in mind, I'd appreciate it if you'd allow at least one of my security team to participate in the qualifications." Ethan nodded at Bill, but didn't give him an answer before he turned to Devon. "Do you know what qualifying as an enforcer entails?" Ethan asked. "Not exactly. No," Devon admitted, unconcerned. "Basically, you're going to have to fight." I listened to what Ethan was saying to Devon, but I inched closer to Gabriel. I hadn't seen him in a few weeks, and I wanted to ask how he was doing when there was a break in conversation, but I didn't want my movement to interrupt anything. Ethan continued. "We're going to set you up with two of my enforcers, and you'll fight until I call a stop." Devon nodded, accepting what he would have to do. Gabriel saw that I was inching in his direction and started to meet me in the middle. As he approached, Devon growled. A deep, rumbling growl, like a wolf warning off an intruder. Gabriel and I both stopped cold and looked at Devon, surprised. Ethan stopped speaking at the interruption. Devon was glaring at Gabriel. "Do not touch her," he all but snarled. "I wasn't planning on it." Gabriel held his hands up in front of himself. "She was headed for me. I thought I'd meet her halfway." Devon looked at me questioningly. "Gabriel is a friend, you know that. He helped me a lot with adjusting when I found out I'm kindred." "I only know you were dating him not too long ago. He needs to keep his hands off my mate." I looked at Gabriel, confused for a second, and trying to figure out where Devon got the idea we dated. Then it hit me. Devon, Gabriel, and I never dated. Sure, we went out together a couple times as friends. Now that I knew what had caused the outburst, I tried to calm him. Nothing more. I stepped away from Gabriel, trying to placate Devon. I was going to wait until I wasn't interrupting things and talk to him, that's all. I couldn't imagine how I might feel if I saw Devon with someone I thought he'd dated recently, especially if I thought she were hitting on him right in front of me. I went back to Devon and took one hand. I leaned against him and rubbed my forehead against his jaw. I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were under the impression that Gabriel and I had dated. He placed a gentle kiss on my forehead and wrapped one arm around my waist. He pulled me up against him, holding me there as he spoke to the Theron. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to interrupt. Instinct got the best of me. Ethan, who had watched the exchange with interest, seemed unperturbed. I see why you're unwilling to let another enforcer travel with her. You do realize that it's only going to get worse unless you seal the mating, don't you? I do, but we're not ready to commit to a lifetime just yet. We've both had a lot of changes in a very short time, and we've agreed to hold off until we're sure. Devon replied. I could see that the Theron had more to say but knew he would be wasting his time, so he changed the subject. All right then, back to what we're doing here. I know you want to qualify as an enforcer in order to serve as Nickie's security when she travels, but will you want to work on the enforcer team? Not full-time. I've got a job I like, and I don't want to leave it, but I wouldn't be opposed to occasionally helping out when you need an extra body. That works. I don't really need someone full-time right now, but occasional help would be good to have in reserve. Assuming you qualify. Ethan nodded to himself. All right, let's get this done. He waved the rest of the men who had been standing to one side. This is what we're going to do. Devon, you're going to fight two men. Terry and Mike, I think. He motioned to one of the newcomers, a tall blonde man with pale blue eyes. Here are the rules, Ethan continued. Hand-to-hand only, no weapons, no equalizers. The point isn't to hurt each other, but to let me see how you fight. Oh, and human form only, you shift, you fail. Understand? Got it. Devon agreed, still holding me against his side. Then let's get the show on the road. The Theron turned back to the group of enforcers, waiting for instructions. Terry and Mike, you two against Devon here. Let's see what he's got. The others backed away, forming a rough circle, as Devon released me and stepped into the middle of the space formed by the other enforcers, and waited calmly. Mindful of Devon's reaction when I'd approached Gabriel earlier, I stayed close to Bill, not wanting to distract Devon. I'd get a chance to talk to Gabriel later, I was sure. I stood quietly and watched as first Terry, then Mike advanced on Devon from different sides. He watched both of them, looking for signs of who would move first. He didn't wait for them to attack, instead he rushed Mike, surprising him with an elbow to the face before slamming Mike's body down into an upraised knee. Mike backed off, gasping for breath. Devon turned to face Terry, his hair flying with the force of his spin. Terry moved in swiftly with a hard blow to Devon's stomach. Devon twisted, avoiding some of the blow, but not all of it. Behind him, Mike had recovered enough that he was moving into the battle again. Devon knocked Terry's arm away as he tried for another blow and returned the strike. He landed a hard slug alongside the head, knocking Terry off his feet. Devon crouched under the roundhouse that Mike threw behind him and spun low, sweeping one leg out as he went, knocking Mike's feet out from under him, making him land hard on his back. Mike rolled and hit his feet about the time Terry made it to his. They both charged Devon at the same time, one from the front, the other from the side. As Devon used the elbow of one arm to block the kick Terry threw at him, he was unable to block Mike's tackle and they both went down. Devon hit the ground first but was already twisting his body, maneuvering so that he rolled on top of Mike before Mike could use the position to his advantage. Clouding Mike again, Devon stood and turned in time to dance out of Terry's path. He grabbed Terry's shirt with both hands and tripped him, sending him sprawling on top of Mike. Enough! Ethan shouted. Devon was the only one still standing, but he extended his hand, offering to help the men he'd been fighting up. One at a time, they took his hand and let him help them stand. Once all three men were on their feet and knocking the dust off their clothes, Ethan spoke again. "Well, Devon, you qualify. Where'd you learn to fight like that?" "I spent the last 10 years with the Army." "That's not standard Army hand-to-hand training." He sounded like he knew what he was talking about. "No, it's not. I had friends who were Rangers. I was recruited, but I was planning on a career. Since special forces tend to burn out long before they make retirement, I opted out. That didn't keep me from learning as much from them as I could, though." "If you were planning on a career, what brought you back?" "I got hurt. Badly enough that I hadn't healed to suit them after almost a year, and they gave me a medical discharge, so I came home." "We don't get hurt like that." "I thought you knew," Devon said, surprised. He looked at Bill. "You didn't tell him?" "No," Bill replied. "I didn't want it to have an impact on whether or not you qualified." "Tell me what?" Ethan asked. "I thought the whole pack knew by now. I was a non-shifter," he said simply. "I've only been able to shift for a few weeks." "So you learned to fight as a human?" "Yes, sir." "How did you manage to finally shift?" "Let's just say that since I moved home, I've been lucky in a lot of ways." He smiled at Ethan, not once glancing in my direction. "You certainly have. You learned to fight well, and you've translated it into your new strength with surprising adaptability. I could have let the fight continue, but you all would have been hurt, and I don't see any reason for that. You'll be able to act as your mate's enforcer when she travels, and I'll be able to call on you when I need a little extra help. I think it works out well all the way around." "I agree. Thank you, sir." Devon shook Ethan's hand, then turned to shake Bill's as well. "Thank you for setting this up for me, sir." "No problem. After what we saw earlier, I think it's a good idea that you travel with her. I didn't realize things were that advanced." "I hadn't either until I was growling," Devon admitted wryly. "But we'll deal with it." "That I have no doubt of. Though I will advise that you don't push this one," Bill nodded his head in my direction, "into anything she doesn't want to do." Devon laughed and reached out to take my hand. He tugged me closer to his side. "Have you ever known her to allow herself to be pushed into anything she didn't want to do to begin with?" "A couple times when she was a kid. And man, did she make them pay for that." Bill laughed in response. "Laugh it up, you two." I scowled at them. "Would you really rather I was easily manipulated?" No. No, not at all," Bill assured me. Devon pulled me close and kissed me on the forehead. "Never." "I'm going to go talk to Gabriel," I told Devon. "No growling." I poked him playfully in the chest before turning away. "Just don't let him touch you," he said to my back. "I'm never gonna live that down." "Am I?" he asked Bill and Ethan. "Nope," Ethan agreed. "She'll be reminding you of that one for years, trust me." Their chuckles faded as I approached Gabriel. "Hey," I said, stopping a short distance from him. "How've you been?" "Good." He glanced from me to Devon, still standing near Bill. "You sure you should be over here?" "Why shouldn't I?" I challenged. "Don't worry," I softened my tone. "I told him I was gonna talk to you this time. Besides, he thought we'd been dating and he was jealous. It's kinda cute." "Yeah, let's see if your story's the same when you're the one he's growling at." I laughed. Growling at me would get him nowhere, and he knows it. Gabriel laughed. "You seem to be settling into life among the kindred very well. Those closest to you know how dominant you are, and treat you accordingly." Those who don't know you yet will find out soon enough. He changed the subject. Any more difficulties? Not with adjusting or the culture, but other things haven't gone so smoothly. Oh. Is it something I can help with? Gabriel asked, still glancing past me to look at Devon occasionally. I suspected that Devon was glaring at him behind my back, but I ignored it. I don't know. I was reluctant to ask for help from anyone but Bill, but I wanted another perspective on it. You remember how you told me that there are elitist groups? The kind that think humans and non-shifters are less than we are? Of course. Are you saying you've encountered someone like that? He scowled at the thought. Unfortunately, yes. I think there's a group of them here in our pack. What makes you think so? Well, an old friend, a kindred, started acting strangely. He became possessive and started telling people, including me, that I'm his mate. Before we realized that Devon and I are mates, before Devon even shifted, he was very nasty about Devon's inability to shift. I've also recently discovered that Devon's been harassed since he got back to town. It's progressed to the point of vandalism, and not long ago they slashed a couple of tires on Devon's truck. Is that all that's happened? Mostly. He narrowed his eyes. There's something you're not telling me. I can't investigate efficiently unless I know it all. I know, but the rest is kind of stupid. I bet it's not. But I have to know what it is. Well, I felt stupid saying it, but I knew he needed to know. I felt like I'm being watched at odd times. I leave the office for lunch, and I feel it the whole time until I get back to work. Then after work, I leave and there's nothing. Go on. Someone had flowers delivered to me at work. There was no card, and the delivery girl had no idea who sent them. I've asked anyone I can think of that might send them, and no one knew anything. A few days later, I got an odd call. A muffled voice asked how I liked the flowers. We haven't been able to figure out who it was, but there haven't been any more calls either. Anything else? I was reluctant to tell him about the note, but knew it would be better for him to know it all than just a portion. I got out of work a few days ago and found a note on my car. It was in an envelope under my windshield wiper. What did the note say? Stay away from the imposter. I quoted. I'm pretty sure Brandon wrote it, but I don't think he left it. Did you pick up a scent on it? I shook my head. There was something I didn't recognize, but nothing I could place, not even Brandon, and I know his scent. Where is the note now? It's in my purse. I dropped it there when we couldn't figure out who left it. We? Devon and I. Ah. Would it be possible for me to take it, see what I can find out? I don't see why not. Can you drop it by Bill's? He glanced over my shoulder again. I don't think it would be a good idea for me to come by your place to pick it up. I laughed, finding his wariness of Devon amusing. There's no need, my purse is in the truck. I went to the pickup and retrieved the envelope. Handing it to Gabriel, I asked, let me know if you find anything out, okay? Sure, no problem. He agreed. I went back to check on Devon, and he welcomed me with an arm across my shoulders as he continued speaking. When he finished what he was saying, he turned to me. I've just learned that this place is often used by members of the pack for runs. Devon said. Oh, that's good to know. I leaned into him, rubbing my cheek softly against his shirt. You're both welcome here anytime, Ethan invited. It's my place, but no one lives here full-time, so don't worry about bothering anyone. Are you sure? I asked. Very, he replied. Most of the pack knows about it, including all of the enforcers. The only reason I hadn't already told you, Nickie, Bill explained. Is that I hadn't found time to introduce you to our Theron, and I didn't want to send you out here without having met him. I nodded, understanding. In fact, Ethan spoke again. You're welcome to join us now. He motioned to where the other enforcers had been standing. I followed his gesture and saw the men still present were in varied states of undress as they prepared to shift. I quickly looked away, blushing. I kept my eyes averted as I replied. That sounds like fun. I think I'll go over to the truck and shift. I stepped out from under Devon's arm and headed for the truck. Behind me, I could still hear the men talking. The truck wasn't parked far enough away for me not to. She's still shy? I heard Bill ask Devon. A little, she's getting better. Devon replied. It's easier for her when it doesn't surprise her like that. Bill was silent, but I knew he was nodding. I'd just spent too much time around him not to know. Devon spoke again. If you don't mind, I'll go shift too. The gravel crunched under his feet as he followed me, detouring to the driver's side of the pickup. I went to the passenger's door and started taking off my clothes, folding before stacking them in the seat. I finally kicked off my shoes and carefully stepped on the gravel driveway in my bare feet. I set my shoes up in the floorboard of the truck and gave Devon a brief grin before closing the door. I bent, crouching over my feet, with my hands touching the ground in front of me as I concentrated on my wolf form. My muscles shifted and popped, the fur pushed its way out of my skin in a transformation that was no longer painful. Seconds later, I stood next to the truck on 4 legs. The perspective in wolf form always surprised me when I'm someplace new. Seeing things from different angles isn't the most shocking, it's the sense. Since the first time I shifted, my sense of smell has dramatically improved, even in human form. But even now, my human senses are weak compared to my wolf form. When I spend time as a wolf, I can smell a million different scents, all overlapping, waiting to be peeled back and discovered. Who or what has been there before me becomes a mystery to be solved. But sometimes it's overwhelming, and I struggle just ignore it all and focus on something else entirely. I padded around to the front of the truck and found Devon there waiting for me. You ready for this? I asked him telepathically. More than. It's been days since I had the time to shift, and I can't wait. I pulled the thought from his head. Let's go. I turned and loped away. I stopped once to look back over my shoulder and make sure he was following. I'd only been out in animal form with Devon a few times, and only once since he'd shifted. You might think that going for a run together would have been one of the first things we'd do once he could shift, but we've both been busy, and what time we've been able to spend time together, we hadn't wanted to take the time to find somewhere we felt safe shifting. I yipped, teasing him as I ran farther from him. He sped up to chase me and I dodged him, darting to the side and circling around so I could nip his flank with my teeth. He let out a playful growl. Hey, that's not nice, he thought. When have I ever claimed to be nice? I thought back, laughing as I darted away again, trying to get him to chase me. I wasn't sure why, but getting him to chase me, to pursue me like this, felt important. When he didn't follow immediately, I went back. Twisting around, I bit down on his tail. I gave it a sharp tug before releasing it. I wasn't trying to hurt him, just to get him to play. I ran again. This time, he quickly followed, nipping at my tail and flank when I slowed enough to let him catch up enough to reach them. After a few minutes of this game, I thought of something. I stopped suddenly and watched Devon continue past me, and then I started after him. I raced forward, and when I got close enough, I pounced on him, sending us both tumbling as I knocked him off his feet. Hey! What was that for? He thought at me. For fun. I replied. Are you enjoying yourself? Very much. I nuzzled my snout along his neck. You realize we've only been out together as wolves once? Yeah, I do. As much as I've wanted to spend more time like this with you, we never seem to have time. We've got time now. I nipped at him again, before jumping up and darting away. "What's this all about?" he asked. "I don't really know, but it's fun. Something in me wants you to chase me, to catch me if you can. If that's how you want to play it, I'm game." He rolled to his feet and took off running. I knew there were others out with us, but I didn't know where. Maybe it was just that I was so focused on playing with Devon, I didn't notice them. I don't really know. We ran and chased each other until we were both out of breath. "Let's head home," I sent him. "There's something I want, but I'm not doing it here, not with everyone around." I hadn't forgotten they were there, even if I didn't see them. Devon chuckled through our connection. "All right, let's head back to the truck." I raced him back to the truck. I left him so far behind that I was shifted, dressed, and in the seat waiting for him by the time I opened the pickup door. "Eager?" he teased, grabbing his jeans from the seat of the truck. "More than a little." I squirmed in my seat. The thought of getting him home and into bed sent waves of heat through my body. He looked at me strangely for a second, then finished dressing. He climbed up into the driver's seat and started the engine. Backing up to turn around, he asked, "Are you okay?" "I'm okay, just really ready to be home," I assured him. "Then I'll get you there as soon as I can." He leaned over and gave me a soft, brief kiss before pulling out of the parking area. Devon pulled the truck onto the highway, headed back to town. He kept glancing at me, as though he could sense something was different. "What was it you gave Gabriel?" Devon asked, trying to draw me into conversation. "The note from on my car. He's the one who originally told me about the kind of groups that it appears Brandon's a part of. It occurred to me that in his position as Bill's enforcer, that he should know if we have one in town." He asked a bunch of questions, getting as much info as he could. I gave him what I could, but it wasn't much. I didn't really think the two were related. I just assumed that Brandon was screwing with me again. But Gabriel thought they might be, and he asked to have the note so he can look into it. I didn't see any reason not to. I shrugged. He nodded. "I'm sorry about earlier. I thought you two were dating when I ran into you a few weeks back. I know there's no reason to worry. But when I saw him approaching you, something inside snapped and I growled. I didn't mean to do it. But once I had, I couldn't back down." "I understand. It didn't bother me. Surprised me, but didn't upset me. I actually thought it was kind of amusing. And don't think I don't know that you glared at Gabriel the whole time I talked to him. It was all I could do not to burst out laughing now. But I knew Devon wouldn't find it so amusing. I couldn't let him think that I wasn't aware that he was too close to you." "He wasn't too close, you just enjoyed intimidating him." "He was too close, it took a lot to keep from attacking him. I know up here," Devon touched his head with one finger, "that you never dated him, but here," he tapped his chest, "isn't so easily convinced." I don't know what to say. I was floored. I wouldn't purposefully do anything to hurt Devon, but it seemed like I had without meaning to. "Don't say anything. It's not your problem, it's mine. It's instinct, and part of leaving our mating unsealed. I know that. Just like I know it will likely get worse before it gets better. I still feel like I should say something, I should do something. Not unless you're triggering these responses deliberately. How could I be doing that? Most of the time, I'm lost on why things are happening until someone explains it to me. Then how can you feel guilty?" "I don't know, I just do." I slid over in the seat until I sat beside him and laid my head against his shoulder. Content with the contact, I was quiet the rest of the trip home. Devon pulled the pickup into the lot on his side of the apartment complex and turned off the engine. I'd been content to sit beside him for the drive. But now that I could, I stretched up to kiss him. I poured all the aching want I'd shoved aside into the kiss. I moved until I knelt on the seat beside him. I pulled him against me. Devon twisted to face me and I felt his hands on my body. They started at my waist, steadying me while he shifted in the seat. They moved up my body, pushing and pulling at my clothes. We jumped apart when his elbow hit the horn on the steering wheel, startling us both. "Oops, I guess I got carried away," I said. "You're not the only one, but let's move this inside." I nodded and grabbed the strap to my purse while he climbed out. Not bothering to move across the truck, I followed him out his side. I went up the short walk to his apartment, barely able to keep from reaching out and touching his ass as I watched him walk. I followed him inside and dropped my purse on the floor as I all but leapt on him. I was barely aware of the door closing as his mouth once again met mine. I tugged impatiently at his clothes and mine, desperate to touch his skin. I felt him wrestling with my clothes, pushing my shorts off my hips and letting them fall to the ground. I lifted his shirt and ran my hands over his chest and back until he pushed me against the wall beside the door. His mouth never left mine as he pushed my shirt up and tugged my bra down, freeing my breasts. He cupped and squeezed them, flicking his thumbs over the tips until I moaned into our kiss and curled my fingers into his skin. My hands went to his jeans, and I fumbled with the buttonfly while he ran his hands down my sides and slipped inside my panties. He easily slid them off my hips before sliding one hand between my legs, dipping his finger into my core seeking the slick moisture there. He growled deep in his throat when he found me hot and ready for him. His wet fingers circled my clit several times before he pulled his hands away. He took over my struggle with his jeans and quickly shoved them down his legs. Seconds later, he wrapped his hands around my waist and lifted me against the wall. I picked up my legs, letting my underwear fall forgotten to the floor as I wrapped my legs around his waist. His hard latex-covered cock pressed against my belly and I whimpered. Devon lifted me slightly, positioning himself at my entrance. I wrapped my arms up his back until my hands came up over his shoulders, pulling him tighter against my body. He thrust upwards while letting me drop down onto him, sinking all the way into me in one swift stroke. I groaned as my body shuddered and clenched around him. He lifted me again, stroking in and out of my body with swift, strong movements. My fingers curled into his skin and I had to break away from his kiss, tipping my head away from Devon's body as his strokes became stronger. He was close and it was pushing me closer. I bit my bottom lip to keep from biting him, as wave after wave of pleasure washed over my body. Devon dropped his head against the wall beside mine. "Wow. You can say that again." I struggled to catch my breath. Devon picked up his head and kissed me. I flinched when the pressure on my lips stung where I'd bitten myself. He pulled back and looked down at me. A frown formed on his face. "Why'd you bite your lip?" "To keep from biting you, the urge was just that strong." His scowl deepened. "I don't like you hurting yourself." I didn't hurt at the time. That little bit of pain at just the right moment actually made the pleasure stronger. He licked across the open wound. "I still don't like it." He carefully lowered me to the ground, holding on in case my legs wobbled. "What about next time? What if the urge to bite gets stronger?" "I don't think that'll happen." There was something different this time, something that started at the ranch. "But we'll face it if it happens." I kissed him again, more gently this time. "Besides, I heal fast, it will be gone in just a couple hours." "Don't worry." I made my way to his bedroom, knowing he would follow. I planned on stretching out on his bed, hoping I could get him to curl up with me for a while.